Trials of a Royal Guard. By Ansel. Chapter 34. The Offer. It wasn't every day that one of Equestria's ministers shows up at your door. Even with my close association to the princesses, this was highly unusual. The minister was not a misguided alicorn that loved me. He was a professional politician that rarely had time for individuals. His sole purpose was to look at the largest picture possible and make the best decisions for every pony as a whole when it came to our defense. Yet here he was, at my door. This wasn't an official visit to discuss the business of the crowns or a trip for the troops to improve their morale. This was Minister Sombra here for Silent Night. "Minister, please, come in. We were just about to have dinner. Would you care to join us?" He shook his head but did come inside, removing his hat. "Thank you, but no. You were not expecting company and I do not wish to overstay my welcome." "No, sir. You are always welcome in my house. You've done many great things for the soldiers of Equestria." The hematite unicorn waved a hoof. "I did my duty, just as you've done, Major. Ponies like us require no thanks for that." Crystal shifted back to the kitchen where she pretended to busy herself with her cooking, but both of her ears were directed towards me. I shook my head. "I'm not a major any longer, sir. Silent is fine." Minister Sombra smiled ever so slightly and chuckled. "Forgive me, but I'm afraid that isn't fully accurate. By definition, you are still a major at this time. I understand and respect your choice to take your discharge, however. Until that is complete, it is not appropriate for me to address you as anything else. You understand, of course." These were technicalities but he was correct. "Yes, sir." "Understood." He nodded. "Good. I have come to personally apologize for the way your case was handled. I am directly responsible." I went to speak in disagreement but he held up a hoof. "Allow me to finish, please. It was my program and I am responsible for all of my subordinates. That makes this failing my failing. Now, I've seen the notes from your meeting and obviously you've raised some excellent points. We can't just let combat veterans be turned away due to some minor non-compliance. We also can't watch them constantly, waiting for them to falter. As our beloved Princess Celestia put it, they have done their part for us. It is now we who must do ours for them and their loved ones." Where was he going with this? It wasn't evident yet, so I just nodded and replied, "Yes, sir." Upon my return and learning of the princess's investigation into the program, I also launched one of my own. Not to see what happened that much is evident but what should happen. There have already been changes made, such as not using courtrooms. The officers that oversaw your case were reassigned, of course. Not as a punishment, I just don't think they're suited for this line of work. Only medical officers will be permitted to hold those positions now. Ones that will look out for what is best for the patients first, not the interests of the military. Perhaps my defiance would make a difference after all. "Thank you, sir. That is heartening. I'm glad my sisters and brothers will not go through what I did." "Indeed they won't. Now, that brings me to the ulterior motive of my being here. You see, Major, the war is over now and a lot of ponies will be coming home. Ponies that remember the heroics of Dread Knight and the Black Dragoons. Only they'll find that Major Knight, Captain Bringia and many others have left the military. They might ask why. They may be fearful. It was coming. He was going to ask me to not take the discharge." My hoof twitched but I did my best to stand still even as my jaw started clenching. "I humbly ask that you reconsider your discharge. Please, not for me, but for the others. I need Major Knight in the military when they return. They need to see that one of their heroes endured and that they can, too. Can you do that for me?" It hurt to hear. It was like being stabbed in the heart. "Minister, please. I do care about them. A lot. I don't want to be a soldier. I don't want to kill ever again. My wife. I can't leave her. He shook his head. You won't, Major. I am not opposed to negotiation. Tell me how to make this work. A promotion, perhaps. No, sir, I'm not trying to get leverage on you, I swear. That isn't my motivation here. Minister Sombra held up a hoof. My apologies. I should not have assumed. What can I do, then? What will it take? Why was he doing this? I had made my decision. This was done. He wants to be a royal guard, Crystal blurted out before gasping and covering her mouth with a hoof. What? The minister's gaze left me and turned to my wife. Pardon. Crystal quickly said, Minister, I realize this is highly unusual, but could I have a moment alone with my husband? She trotted to our bedroom and stood just outside the door. Minister Sombra shook his head. Not at all, Mrs. Wishes. It would be abnormal not to discuss such an important decision with one's spouse. Thank you, Crystal said before motioning to the bedroom. Silent, a word, please. What was going on here? Excuse me a moment, sir. I trotted into the bedroom. My wife followed close and shut the door behind us. What are you doing? I whispered. He's offering you whatever you want. I want to be free. Crystal shook her head. No, you don't. You just don't want to go to war again, but the war is over. Silent, I love you. I love you so much. I can't sit here and watch you, flounder. Look me in the eyes and tell me you don't miss being a royal guard. Not a soldier. A guard. It was tough to look her in the eyes, but I did it. I can't tell you that. I do, but that doesn't matter. You've suffered enough and I refuse to go through their hoops. It is over. I'll do something else. And be miserable doing it, Crystal huffed before setting her hoof on my chest. Silent night, you are a royal guard in here. I knew that when I married you. I am grateful you want to do this for me, but this is like asking me not to write. I shook my head. No, it isn't. You're not going to get killed writing. Your talent doesn't potentially ruin us. I've made a lot of decisions for the guard, Crystal. A lot of ones that hurt you, hurt us. I can't do that again, and if I don't put the guard first, I'm not sure I can do the job. Honey, thank you. She set her hooves on my cheeks and kissed me softly. Silent night, I accept the risk. You're a royal guard. Go out there, tell Minister Sombra that you'll only come back if he makes you a royal guard. Pick a command you'd like. Perhaps a less dangerous one, but one you'd enjoy. If you get killed doing your job, you can die knowing we made this decision together. My forehooves trembled as I set them on her forelegs. Are you sure? She nodded without any hesitation. Yes. I married a royal guard. I am a royal guard wife. Okay. Okay. I didn't know what to say. I just wrapped my hooves around her and held tightly. Having a clear direction again would be amazing. There was still the issue of me having emotional problems, but light duty would be acceptable to all, I was sure. Reluctantly, I let Crystal go and returned to the living room. Minister Sombra and his royal guard escort were waiting patiently. Sir, my wife was correct when she spoke earlier. I do not wish to remain in the army, nor could I agree to return to an infantry command. If you could see me restored to the royal guard, however, I'd be able to consider it. Minister Sombra replied rather eagerly, done. You were a royal guard before. Why wouldn't you return to your branch following the war? No Ponei would question that. About my command, though, yes, well, that is a bit trickier, of course. Should I assume that you'd like to remain here in Canterlot? And should I further assume you'd prefer something in the palace? I nodded. Yes, sir. To both. Without me unfairly impacting another officer's career, of course. That was a must. I wouldn't just let them push some pony out for me. Not again. The minister gave the slightest hint of a sigh. It was subtle. After all, he was still a politician. Of course, of course. I'm sure we can come up with something suitable. There are a lot of officers that were displaced. Plus, we have a lot returning. We'll need to find work for them, too. Leave that with me. Anything else? I continue my treatment with the Flower Foundation, not the military's program. The board can review their findings in the end to decide if I'm fit to command guards again. That won't look good, but I'm betting this condition is not negotiable. Not if you want me back, sir. I apologize for holding your hooves to the fire here, but I won't come back that way. Minister Sombra chuckled softly. Are you sure you wouldn't rather have a promotion? Vice Colonel Knight sounds good. Although Colonel Knight sounds even better. Unearned, sir. He snorted. We disagree there, but I accept your terms. He offered a hoof and I bumped it with my own. Report to the palace on Monday, Major. I have immediate work for you to do while we figure out what your command will be. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. It is my pleasure, Minister Sombra said before turning and walking out with his escort. I shut the door behind him. Excitement filled me. The same excitement I'd felt when I first joined the guard. When I turned, Crystal was leaning against our bedroom doorway. Welcome back, Major. Thank you. We should probably see to dinner. And then I think I want to celebrate. Crystal idly stroked a hoof along the doorframe. Or we could celebrate first and then eat dinner. Or celebrate twice. Well, when you put it like that, I trotted towards her, full of excitement. The most I'd felt in a while. The long weekend Crystal and I shared after Minister Sombra's visit had been a whirlwind of activity. First, there was the paperwork. Evidently, even the Minister of Defense can't remove an officer from limbo without some red tape. Various Royal Guard messengers had delivered forms to me no less than 3 times. I'm certain if we'd had Azurite we could have saved some time, but she was busy doing whatever it was she did on weekends. Probably Sunny and Soren. There was also the issue of the transfer. I had to be reassigned from the army back to the Royal Guard. More paperwork there. Once all of that was handled, I was officially a Royal Guard again. A Royal Guard Major without a command or role. Crystal and I had then scrambled to get my equipment out of storage. I owned a lot of kit. More than the average guard since much of mine had been gifted to me by the kingdom or from my family. Additionally, since I'd earned the Celestia Cross, I was allowed to wear any armor I was rated for regardless of my role. That made choosing difficult. The Dragoon armor was right out. It was way too heavy and aggressive for a Royal Guard officer. Plus, the helmet filled me with all kinds of dread. There was also the combat-ready suit of regular armor I'd worn early on in the war. It wasn't much different than what Royal Guards wore now. It was just thicker, heavier, and more covering. Ultimately, my eyes kept going to my favorite suit of armor, my second suit of House Guard armor. Technically, it was a combination of the remnants of the first suit and new components, but it had come out as a wholly new set of armor. It also had been worked on by all of my friends and family. What armor could be more appropriate? The helmet needed a little sprucing up, though. It was time for a larger crest, one that was more suited to my rank. In the past, Sunny had mentioned a stallion she used all the time for her armor. That was one thing she never skimped on. Sunny's kit was always perfectly fit, shiny, and oozing with class. It didn't take much effort to find her stallion. He'd done the work pretty quickly and provided me with a new, blue and white crest. It was rather impressive looking. Now everything was complete. I just had to start back on the job. Don't you look handsome and confident, Crystal cooed at me as I stood in front of her mirror. I'd spent hours polishing my armor. It looked brand new. It is my first day back at work. I need to make a good impression. Crystal snorted and leaned close to carefully kiss me. Yes, Major Knight needs to worry about impressions. I think you have that covered. Still, I'm very pleased with that look in your eye. I tilted my head. What look? She shrugged. I don't know how to explain it. It was a look the silent knight I met all of those years ago had. It is good to see it again. It is all thanks to you, I replied before turning and walking out into the living room. Oh, don't give me all of the credit. Azurite was the one that stuck you in paperwork limbo. You should get her a treat. The treat was me not stomping on her for disobeying my wishes. Crystal laughed and trotted out into the living room. She gleefully circled me before poking my nose with a hoof. You're glad? You just pretend to be grumpy. No, I'm a legitimately grumpy pony. Ask any pony. I'm going to work now. Goodbye, love. Goodbye, handsome. And no flying in armor. You trot your way there. My nose wrinkled as I went out the door. Yes, dear. How humiliating for me to have to trot to work. It really didn't bother me that much, though. A few more lost pounds, a stronger brace, more physical therapy, and I might just be able to change my commute to how it used to be. When I arrived at the palace, I went through the main gate just how I used to. There would be no waiting for me. That seemed just fine by the palace guards, too. They all stood to attention as I passed. I was home. I was in the Royal Guard. It felt amazing. So amazing, in fact, that when I trotted through the castle door it didn't dawn on me until I got halfway to Princess Luna's wing that I wasn't going there. An about-face took me off towards the offices of government within the castle complex. I was supposed to report to Minister Sombra. That would be where I'd get my assignment. The Hall of Ministry was not a place I'd spent a lot of time in the past. It was protected by palace guards and had far more civil servant ponies than the rest of the complex. The building itself was one of the oldest in the city. It had been built and remodeled several times long before I or even Clement Knight were born. Even so, the old-style architecture was still in place. Columns encircled the whole building, supporting a roof that overhung the main structure. The Ministry of Defense was on the second floor, and when I arrived, it was in a state of controlled chaos. Paperwork and ponies were rushing about everywhere. That was no surprise. No pony bothered to pay me any mind as I wandered about, trying to figure out where I was supposed to be. They were all too consumed in their tasks. Eventually, I found an office with Minister Sombra's name on the door, so I just knocked. "Come in," came his voice from the other side. I pushed the door open and did so. Minister Sombra's office wasn't nearly as impressive as I expected for a high-level kingdom official. In truth, it was barely bigger than the one I'd had in the palace. Of course, his had a much larger window. Each wall was lined with bookshelves where piles of scrolls and papers had been set. These all matched his rather plain desk that was little more than a wooden table. "Major, welcome to the ministry," he said as he looked me over. "Thank you, sir. Opted to go with your house guard armor. It was always my favorite." He chuckled. "Well, nostalgia is a serious force, Major." "Very good. I have your first assignment lined up. I want you to go over to the receiving station and assist in the preparation to receive the first wave of returning soldiers. More specifically, I want you to personally receive them when they arrive. Then you can turn them over to their respective medical assistance group." My ears wiggled. That was an interesting assignment. Not only had he wanted me to remain with the military, he literally wanted me to be the first thing returning soldiers saw. That was a pretty smart move. "Yes, sir. I can do that." "Good. Feel free to amend the initial intake if you feel it is necessary. You were one of the first that went through it, so if anything felt off, just tweak it. The colonel in command over there knows you work for me and won't kick up any fuss." "Yes, sir. I'll get right to it." Minister Sombra nodded and waved a hoof. Thank you for staying with the military, Major. You're going to make a big difference in the lives of a lot of ponies. Dismissed. As I trotted out, I couldn't help but think he was right. I'd been there. I'd been through the program. I could help others. I could use my status to get them the help they needed. This could be good, or even great. Yes, I was Major Knight. I'd made a big difference on the battlefield, but now it was time to make a bigger one of it. That is what I'd be remembered for. Author's note: if you are enjoying this story, please consider taking a look at Crystal and Mai's website quillandblade.com for extra content such as mini stories, an Ask Us form to submit questions, responses to said questions, and special rewards for the awesome folks who support our Patreon. End author's note.